All right. So it is March 9th, 2023, 7:16 p.m. And this is our, we're calling the meeting to order for the Ashland Planning Board. Our first item is the clerk report, but we will formally welcome Alvaro, our new assistant planner for the community here, and welcome aboard. And Peter, other than jumping into clerk reports, do you need to read anything as far as an official open record?
No, but I just want to make it clear to everybody on the meeting tonight is that we do have a planned executive session meeting at 8:30. And so we will be using the same link. And so at 8:30, I will be moving everybody out of the meeting and then into the waiting room and or off the meeting. And then once you can rejoin and stay in the waiting room. The planning board will be entering back into open session after that is completed. But I just want to make sure that it's well known that obviously we do have an executive session and we will be entering back into open session after that is completed. We have 4 things on the agenda tonight, as noted. And I do want to make clear from the get-go that 949 Homer Street is continued tonight, and we will not be discussing that application. And so the 3 applications we'll be discussing are the Scenic Road, public hearing for Eversource, 0 Sewell Street, public hearing, and then we will be moving into 10 to 60 Main Street. And depending on how our conversations fall, we will be obviously moving into executive session at 8:30. Other than that, Anna, that's all I have.
Yep, and I'll add formally that the chair of the planning board, Tricia Kendall, will rejoin the meeting and chair when she returns, and I will chair until then as vice chair. So at this point, we'll start with the clerk report from Kate.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have received 4 public correspondence via email from the last planning board meeting on 2/23. That's the report.
Okay. And at this point, we're going to open the public hearing for the Scenic Road public hearing, Eversource Energy Maintenance Tree Pruning. And Peter, will you read the proper language?
I will. So to open up the hearing, in accordance with the provisions of the Ashland Scenic Road bylaw, the Ashland Planning Board will hold a public hearing on March 9th, 2023 at 7:15 via Zoom conference link to hear the petition of Eversource Energy 247 Station Drive, Westwood, Massachusetts 02090, filing the Scenic Road application for maintenance and tree pruning on Olive Street, Spring Street, Elliott Street, Cherry Street, Cedar Street, Fountain Street, and Franklin Street. The Eversource tree program is scheduled on a circular basis by electrical circuit. Every electrical circuit is targeted for tree pruning once every 4 years. In 2023, tree maintenance is scheduled for the 126-82, 274-81, and the 519-175H1 circuits. There's bullet points. The 126H2 circuit includes Olive Street from West Union Street to the Hopkinton Town Line, and the portion of Spring Street from Olive Street and continuing southeast for approximately 1/5 of a mile. Bullet point 2, the 274-81 circuit includes a portion of Elliott Street from the Sherburne Town Line to approximately 1/10 of a mile west of Mountain Gate Road. Bullet point 3 is a 519-175H1 circuit, includes the entirety of Fountain Street, Franklin Road circuit, Cedar Street from East Union Street to Elliott Street, in a section of Cherry Street starting on West Union Street and extending north for approximately 120 yards. The pruning will remove all vegetation 10 feet from the sides and below, and 15 feet above the primary electrical conductors. No trees 8 inches or greater measured 4 feet from the ground or major branches will be removed. parties wish to be heard on this matter should submit comments to the planning board ahead of time and appear at the public hearing in the place indicated above. Materials will be viewed on the Town of Ashland's website and at the planning board, and in town hall by appointment or during regular business hours. For more business, please contact Peter Matchek and I'll list my phone number and email. That is the public hearing. This has become an annual public hearing as Eversource is maintaining their lines. If I may, Madam Chair, I will introduce Matt from Eversource, who is on the screen. Matt is a professional arborist working with Eversource, who is here to represent the application and can provide any and all additional information.
Great. And Matt, before you jump in, I just want to summarize for the planning board, and this is based on Peter's summary that went to us prior to the meeting, that the scenic ways that are affected are Olive Street, Spring Street, Elliott Street, Cherry Street, Cedar Street, Fountain Street, and Franklin Street, just so that we have them all listed in one place. And it looks like the proposed pruning is 10 feet to the sides and below the wires and 15 feet above the primary lines. And it looks like Matt is here on behalf of Eversource. And Mr. Matthew Mitchell, why don't you tell us a little bit about the application and what this will entail?
Yeah, for sure. Peter did a pretty good job of going over the geographical scope, so I won't belabor that point. But yeah, our pruning program prunes each circuit every 4 years, and that's an industry standard, basically determined by the average growth rate of trees in New England. And our clearance is 10 feet to the side, 15 feet above. Now officially it says that we're going to be removing all vegetation, but any established leaders, generally we would be going through proper procedure if we wanted to prune it. Normally we don't tend to do that too much. This is going to be mostly focusing on smaller growth or branches. Any large leaders that get pruned would be stuff that's already dead. That shouldn't be too controversial. But yeah, I took a drive down the streets earlier today just to take a look at things before the meeting. And a lot of what's going to be pruned is just mostly undergrowth. There's only a few of these streets that have a significant overhead canopy. And for those, I don't foresee there needing to be major work. Like I said, mostly just pruning back to the space that we've established before. These are all streets that we've done the same scope of work on. This isn't going to be anything new to those streets or those trees. It's going to be pruning things back to space that's already been established.
Okay, and at this point, I will open it up for questions from the planning board first before public comment. And I certainly have some, but I want to make sure other members of the planning board are able to go first. Does anyone have any questions for Matt, for Eversource?
I do. One is about the pruning standards you use, because I did drive all those areas and you could see, I have no idea if it was Eversource or just over time, but I mean, I don't know if anyone else got a haircut from a friend during COVID because you didn't know if you go, but I did, right? And it got cut, right? But it wasn't a professional. And then I went to other areas and you're like, oh, you could sort of see it was cut because maybe the tree was around the line, but you didn't stand out that it got cut. So I want to, one of my questions is about your standards for pruning.
Yeah, so I could take that up. So all of our arborists are trained arborists who are certified to work near power lines. Now, you know, I'm not going to sort of hide around things like when you have trees whose natural growth form is to grow really tall that are growing up underneath the lines, there's going to be some conflict because the two can't exist in the same space without posing risk to electrical reliability or public safety. So they do have to get pruned back. But all of our crews understand and are trained to be making proper industry cuts. That means taking things back to what we call a lateral leader or a lateral branch, basically a secondary branch that is coming out of the side to try to directionally prune these trees around the wires. Now, whether or not that's successful depends a lot on the individual tree species. Some tree species take to that kind of pruning very well, and some of them do not. But our crews will be using proper industry standards for healthy tree pruning.
So there's specifically the ANSI A300. Is that what you're referring to? And you will follow that?
Yes, that's what I'm referring to.
Okay. And then I think I remember watching the hearings a few years ago. I think it was actually this, and there was our tree warden at the time actually rode the entire route with the Eversource person, and I think there were some bigger trees involved. But a couple of things that came out of that, and I recently actually got comments today from the public, is about what police details, how that will be handled. Because there's some of these areas, even though they're scenic roads, traffic's an issue for the public. And it was related to as well, I believe we did have a contact from who was the crew chief. If you're pruning in front of your house, can you talk to someone, right? Can you find out what day, how this is going to work? If they say, I'd prefer you, can you trim less? Is there any way? Those kind of conversations Eversource was open to last time. So I wanted to kind of follow up and see.
Yeah, for sure. So before we trim any circuit, we send out a notification letter that has the Eversource general number on it, and through there, people will get directions that will basically lead them to talking to me. If the standard Eversource customer service rep can't answer their questions, it gets forwarded along to me. I'll reach out to the homeowner and we can discuss the projected work. And if that's not something that, if the full scope of the work isn't something that's acceptable, then try to reach some sort of compromise that benefits both aesthetics and the electrical reliability and public safety. So people are given the opportunity before the crews come in to reach out and discuss things.
What's the time frame on that? Like from getting a notice to cutting? So if that we can tell the public they can expect the notice. Mm-hmm. Is it a day or is it 2 weeks or a month to try to, if they have concerns?
So I usually try to get the letters out a week beforehand. I don't want to wait. I don't want there to be too much of a lead time because it's a pretty big circuit. I don't want people getting a letter talking about work they're not going to see for a month and a half. Because by then everyone's forgotten about it. So it's definitely a fine line, but I usually try to give people around a week.
And Kate, do you have other questions?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Marcelo, Deepa, do you have questions?
Not really. I would just say that I love Kate's example. It's very good.
Okay. Hey, your hair looks great, just so we're clear. All right, Deepa, any questions from you?
I'm all set.
Okay, and Matt, my only kind of follow-up question has to do with, I read the scenic route bylaw for Ashland, and it talks about obviously removal of trees or pruning, if you will, for safety, but it doesn't specify in any way how much to remove, right? And so it seems to create a little bit of a conversation opportunity for us to really understand. There's almost like a level of trust, speaking of haircuts, that you're going to cut this just right, and you're not going to cut it too short, right? You're going to keep it safe, but you're going to leave as much tree as possible. And as you mentioned, some trees may not take to it as well as others. So my question is, your application kind of has the standard of, pruning will remove 10 feet to the sides below the wires and 15 feet above primary lines. Is that kind of your max that you might hit if you feel like it, and you sort of see if you can go below that? Or is it something that you just do automatically on every tree no matter what? Can you just kind of clarify that?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I'd say that like anything, like those are specs on paper, but those are more of a guideline. If there's an established oak lead that's like 6-8 inches, something sizable, that's not something that we're going to want to cut without getting permission either through the town if it's a town-owned tree, or through the private property owner if that is the owner. And the specs are that large because we only have the resources to come through every 4 years. So we have to get enough space on the pruning year for there to be enough space for the next 4 years worth of growing seasons, not only to not touch the wires, but for there to not be enough space between the regrowth and the wires that it doesn't break OSHA electrical working conditions. Basically, depending on the voltage of a circuit, you can't have a potential conductor in X amount of inches close to that circuit. And if you do, then that kicks in a bunch of safety rules and regulations that can make things more dangerous for our tree trimmers, or potentially anyone who happens to be touching a tree at the wrong time, wrong place. Now for the actual letter of the law, 10 feet to the side, 15 up top exactly. Sometimes we'll go a little more, and that's only to make sure that we're making proper cuts to make the trees happy, that we're not leaving behind stubs. We're cutting things back to a natural stem. And sometimes we won't be getting that full clearance because there's a pretty nice natural place to make a good cut. That's just a little bit inside that window.
Understood.
So yeah.
But that 10, 15 feet thing is a standard of the industry, right? It's not necessarily in our bylaw. It's more of an Eversource standard. Is that right?
It's a national standard for this amount of year of rotation.
Okay. Any follow-up questions from the planning board before we open it up to the public? Okay. And with that, we will now accept public comment if there's any for this particular item. By raising your hand virtually, Peter will call on you.
Thank you. So at this current moment, we have one hand up, and that is Mr. Mark Sony. Mr. Mark Sony, can you please unmute yourself and please give the record your name and address?
Good. Thank you. Good evening, Mark Sony, 49 Hawthorne Road, near one of the streets that's going to be pruned, Cedar Street. But my question is, as you prune some of the streets are named scenic roads. Is there any special pruning rules that you're going to do that for?
Mark, I would say this is one of the rules, is that we, the planning board has a public hearing on the maintenance and/or tree trimming along that road. And obviously we make specific recommendations of approvals of that trimming. But that's what I can add in as a town planner if Matt from Eversource wants to jump in. But I think that's kind of a broad brush answer to your question.
And I asked that to Matt too. Have you done scenic roads in pruning, and were there different towns with different rules?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm responsible for about half of, I don't know how familiar people are with different utility coverages, but I'm responsible for about half of the Metro Boston area. A coworker of mine is responsible for another, so it's a few dozen towns. And most of them have scenic roads that I do trimming in. So this is definitely something that I've done before.
And what are the rules for scenic roads?
It varies town to town. Usually the main differences are different cutoffs for what you need permission to prune for size of a limb. But generally, not generally, in fact, actually every town that I work in is fairly open to pruning on scenic roads, as long as, of course, we're making good cuts and all that.
Okay, the last comment about this is here in town with the bylaws, scenic road bylaws, there's a certain measurement of 18 inches, if that is correct, Mr. Planner.
And where's that measurement, Mark, coming from?
That's from the scenic road tree pruning and sizes of off the side roads. We're cutting and pruning.
And Mark, I have the scenic route bylaw open right now. Do you know which section you're referencing?
I don't have it in front of me, but it's right after if I can remember it right after
so there's a definition of a tree And that's defined as a diameter of 8 inches or more. And there are various considerations, Mark, in section 24921 that the planning board shall take into consideration, such as public safety is one of those.
Well, that's not what I'm asking about. It's the tree itself and the diameters of the tree that's on a scenic road. And the same rulings as like a stone wall rulings for scenic road.
Yeah, I'm looking, I'm trying to find it right now, Mark. I'm just looking.
And as you look at, the reason why I'm asking, because Cedar Street is a scenic road.
Yeah, no, Cedar Street is a scenic road and it's identified road here.
So I don't see, so there's a section called driveway design standards, Mark, that has to do with cuts in scenic roads and driveway cuts. And there's a discussion of 12 feet there. And then there's no tree with a trunk exceeding 8 inches in diameter, 4 feet above the ground shall be removed for a driveway unless the curb cannot be safely located elsewhere. I think that's the section you're referencing. That's the
It's
section.
either that, excuse me, but either that or they say to begin a project. This is a different way of asking, and don't even know how to ask it. Is like a site review on a scenic road property. And
Yes. So
yeah.
we are supposed to, so the planning board is supposed to review this scenic bylaw and review all the considerations and review whether a driveway is being created or cut. And that's not what's happening here.
No, it's not, because it's a whole
so
street.
The pruning is not creating kind of a driveway per se.
No,
So
it's the whole street with the pruning by Eversource, but not driveways, but the basic street itself.
exactly. So there's about 15 or 10 to 15 factors, including public safety, that the planning board can review. The considerations such as environmental value, public safety, traffic, things like that. And they're right in here. There's also a discussion of functional importance and urgency of repair, maintenance, reconstruction, things like that. So those are the factors that the planning board gets to review. It's not so much about size of, like I said, and like Matt agreed, there's nothing in the bylaw that specifies how much Eversource can prune. And Matt has explained for us that that is Eversource's national standard and that it's not always applicable. So it's up to the planning board to decide if that fits within our consideration, our bylaw.
So
Does that answer your question?
I'm going to answer it in the sense that I can understand it, and I'm not being negative or anything like that. I'm just trying to point out that diameter of trees on scenic roads has a certain number in the bylaw. Not driveway cuts, but scenic roads itself in the tree bylaw by diameters. And I
Yes.
remember long ago, it's about 18 inches when the town was working on that, when Eversource was down by the Howe Street area, cutting trees down there.
Yes, Mark, and the number is 8 inches. And so no tree that is 8 inches at breast diameter height, which is typically around 4 feet for the average person, shall not be removed without a public hearing. And in this case, there's no removal of trees. This is a simple maintenance application.
And very last, I promise, this is it. Is it still the 10-foot off the side of the street width that's going to be working with this?
So it's 10 feet to the side of the very top wire on the telephone poles. Not 10 feet to the not 10 feet starting at the edge of the road layout.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Any other public comment, Pete?
At this time, no other hands are raised.
Okay, so at this point, is it appropriate, Peter, to close public comment and then take a vote, or we take a vote and then close? In what order?
I would close public comment first, and then I would take a vote.
Great. So at this point, I'll close the public comment and I'll open it up for a final discussion for the planning board and a vote if appropriate. Do folks have any thoughts on how we want to approach this?
I'd like to have our vote, if we are allowed, with the conditions that Matt agreed to and readily said we're not imposing new ones, but the tree pruning to ANSI A300, police details and public notice with a specific project contact.
That seems reasonable to me. Deepa, Marcelo, do you have any concerns about that?
No, agree with her.
Hey,
I sort of,
go ahead, Peter.
I sort of make a note, a police detail when necessary, or a police detail for all work.
Well,
Oh, it seems logical. I mean, police details are when there's clear safety issues. I mean, to ask a police detail all the time would be very costly to the town for no reason.
well, it wouldn't be to the town, it'd be to the applicant, but there's those.
Oh, yeah, but for no reason. I mean, the police details are for safety. If there's no safety issues, I mean, that's standard for everything, isn't it?
You know what? This time I wrote, I think, what typically happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, is that the work is the town, the DPW, and the police are notified of the work. And that if a detail is needed in agreement with the police, DPW, and Eversource, then a police detail at that point is then requested.
Yeah. Not every road really requires a detail. If it's a smaller side, like residential road versus like a major throughway. Not every road requires a detail, but any road that has that amount of traffic or like a special situation like a school being nearby, it's standard for us to use details, police details. Sometimes in the past, we've had to ask towns if we can have our contractors use their own certified details just because of a shortage of police details. But normally, when the situation calls for it, using police details is the standard operating procedure.
So I would make a clarification. I'd say traffic control detail. It doesn't have to be police. And I would agree it's not up to the planning board to assess, but I'm not sure we should leave it to the applicant. So we should have some wording that it's discussed with proper public safety personnel of the town of Ashland.
I think that's fine. We can have language that basically says, if requested by town or with input from the town, something like that. So do you want to take a shot, Kate, at the motion?
Sure. I make a motion that the planning board approves the Eversource application for scenic road pruning, subject to pruning in compliance with ANSI A300 standards, subject to public notice with a specific project contact, subject to town input on necessary traffic control details, and the applicant would include traffic control details upon town recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second that.
And a roll call vote?
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Arjona, aye.
Catherine, there's a guy.
And I guess that's, Pete, I don't know how to count it when there's only 4 of us and folks missing. How do we
Just
count that?
4-0-0.
All right, there we go. And now we move on to the second item on our agenda. And of course, my agenda disappeared. Give me a second. And the second item on our agenda is 0 Sewell Street public hearing for reconsideration. And Peter, could you open the record for us?
Sure, I am going to open the record. Please bear with me. Excuse me. In accordance with the provisions of M.G.L. 40A, Section 16, final unfavorable decisions by the permit granting authorities, reconsideration, withdrawal, petition, or variances of application of a special permit, the Ashland Planning Board will hold a public hearing on March 9th, 2023 at 7:15 via Zoom video conference to hear the petition of Rimark LLC, 2 Chestnut Street, Wayland, Massachusetts, 01778. The petitioner is applying for a reconsideration for 0 Sewell Street, ZBA case SP-2-23, and variance case VA3-23. The applicant has modified the previous denial of the zoning board of appeals application by proposing 2 single-family homes on the 2 parcels versus 2 duplex units on each lot, totaling 4 units. And by proposing the house sizes to be in concert with the existing neighborhood. A resubmitted application to the zoning board of appeals would be for a variance for lot size. The property in question is located at 0 Sewell Street, Assessors Map 20, lots 20 and 23, and are within the Village Commerce Zoning District. Parties wish to be heard on this matter should submit comment to the planning board ahead of time and or appear at the time and place indicated above. Materials may be viewed on the Town of Ashland's website and at Town Hall by appointment and during regular business hours. For more information or to submit comments, please contact myself, Peter Matchik, and list my phone number and email address. With that said, I did write a brief and within my email that was sent out on Friday, but this is for a reconsideration of a permit that received an unfavorable vote from the Zoning Board of Appeals this past October. This past October, the applicant, who is tonight represented by Mr. George Connors, who can go into greater detail, denied a application for a special permit in the site plan, which proposed the development of 2 duplexes, 1 on each lot, in total 4 units. Because of the rules and regulations regarding Chapter 40A, there is a 2-year period for repetitive applications. So therefore, the applicant tonight is applying to reapply to the Zoning Board of Appeals with a new project. Tonight, the planning board is hearing the application and is voting for consent, which would allow the applicant to reapply to the Zoning Board of Appeals with a new project. The new project is proposing a single-family house in each lot. Just to make note, I, in my 10-year career as a planner, have never had this application, never had to deal with one of these. So these are kind of few and far between. But with that said, I will, through the chair, I would let Mr. George Connors up the application and go through the process.
So, and George, before you jump in, I just wanted to summarize for the board, and Peter can correct me if I'm wrong, that we're not being asked to evaluate the substance of the project. We're not being asked to say whether the project meets a specific bylaw per zoning. What we're being asked to do is to decide whether there has been a specific and material change in the proposal sufficient to give it back to the zoning board for their consideration. So it's truly a process-oriented question. Do we believe as a planning board, and there has to be a supermajority vote? And Peter, can you clarify, without Tricia here, it looks like Kevin has joined us, but without Tricia here, we would need 3 out of the 5 members, or do we need 4 out of 5?
No, we need 4 out of 5. And
Okay.
Kevin just joined us, so we have a full board sitting on this application. With that, so the Mass General Law calls for a supermajority vote, 5 votes out of the 4. 4 votes out of the 5 members. Do you concur, Mr. Connors?
All that is correct.
So with that in mind, George, why don't you focus us on the key issue, which is how is your application now different from what you presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals?
The petition to the Zoning Board of Appeals dealt with approximately 28,000 square feet of land in the commercial village district, which requires 15,000 square feet of land per lot. Could I share screen, please?
Peter, I don't know how to do that. Yep.
Yep, 1 minute, I got you. Just a note, Anna, I'm going to make you a co-host as well.
Be careful what you do, but okay.
You'll be okay. Don't worry about it. I got it. I'm
All
still-
right, so
still drowning.
we ready to go? Can you see?
Yeah, I can see.
All right, we have Sewell Street here. Pond Street, Route 126 is out on the left side of this drawing. We're dealing with two lots at the end of Sewell Street that are basically undeveloped. Sewell Street has several residential houses along here. That's a self-storage. And in back here is the radio towers. We petitioned to put these lots into a different configuration, which I'll get to in a minute, and build two duplexes on these lots. And the idea was that we didn't have 30,000 square feet. We had about 29,000 square feet. And we asked for variance for one of the lots to be a little bit less than 15,000 square feet. Let me see if I can get to that so you can see what it looked like. There it is. Full Street comes down in the right of way. It becomes more or less a gravel road at this stage. There is a sewer line that went in along this location back about 15 years ago. And when it went in, it trapped water in this location and created, under your local wetlands bylaw, a 25-foot area that no work could take place in. We've taken the lots and we created a 15,000 square foot lot here and a proposed 13,000 square foot lot here, a couple thousand less than the area. Note that the area in Sewell Street has lots that range from 4,000 to 14,000 square feet. We thought that made a lot of sense, and we proposed the duplexes, which are allowed by special permit in this particular zone. It's also the CV zone, so it allows for commercial development to some extent. And we had a little diagram of an 8,000 square foot building as an option under the bylaw. In any event, we were petitioning for a variance to have an undersized lot as frontage, more than the necessary 100 feet, as does this. Our hardship was that we lost a lot of land down here relative to a full use of the parcel as a 28,000 square foot lot, which would be available, even though it's not 30 as a pre-existing non-conforming lot for commercial development. We have to run water from up here all the way down and improve this street based on plans that we had about 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, where we did acquire an interest in some land in back here under a purchase and sale agreement. And for reasons I'm not going to get into, that was not able to be completed, even though we obtained the special permit for the two duplexes, pretty much as shown here. We did not appeal, we did not go to court with the abutter, and we simply waited for time to deal with adjacent landowners to see if we could gain some additional land, but because of
And George, George, I really appreciate the history and the background you're giving us, and we definitely want to get some of that. But could you give us sort of like the breakthrough of what did you present to the zoning board, and how is what the application is now totally different, or excuse me, materially different is the language, I think, of the statute. Could you just kind of hone in on that? What did you propose to them, and how is your new application different?
well, this plan is what we proposed to them.
Okay,
Proposed to have a smaller lot, less than 15,000, and a conforming lot at 15,000. And you can see that the loss of land here was part of that issue. And then we asked for the duplexes under a special permit. So it was two permit requirements. What will be different here is simply that there will be a single family here and a single family there. And in their decision, they indicated that there was a problem with them understanding how we could have a pre-existing non-conforming lot that we created. We did not create these lots. We do that under an A&R were we to get the variance. We also decided that the houses that we were proposing, these houses here, these duplexes, were too big. for the neighborhood, didn't fit into the character of the neighborhood. Rimark has considered that and will now only do single families if we're able to gain the variance for this particular project. We don't need a special permit for single family dwellings. They would be more in concert with the neighborhood. I will indicate that there was a variance granted for this parcel back here for the radio towers and for 2 lots across the street to be created at less than 15,000 square feet each back several years ago before this particular program. So the material changes are that it would not be duplex housing, it would be single family housing.
So the key item is rather than having 2 duplexes next to each other, it's single family next to each other.
Single family, and single family does not need a special permit.
Okay. And any other changes in the application, George, that you want to share with us?
There would be no other changes.
Okay. And at this point, we'll take questions from the planning board before we open it up to the public. Any questions?
I have a question. So I think the application said, maybe I can read it here without misrepresenting. Proposing houses to be in size in concert with the existing neighborhood. So I don't know what that means to the applicant. I think it's a little simplistic to say it's materially different if we got one large house close to the size of a duplex. So I would like to get some information on that.
The 2 houses across the street would be the ones that we try to mimic. I don't know if I can get to that. There are houses over here that we would attempt to mimic. Those do not have garages, but we would have garages. These 2 lots were created by variance from the zoning board many years ago, probably 22 or 25.
George, do you know the size, the square footage of those homes? I know I drove down there the other day. I've driven down the street to take a look at them. In my estimation, they're between 1,800 and 2,200 square feet. Is that?
Well, I think we have Mr. Marks on the call. Maybe he could tell us what he thought for a size. You there, Alan?
I am.
Thank you.
Alan, just for the record, do you mind, or Mr. Marks, do you mind just introducing yourself and giving your name and address?
Yes, my name is Alan Marks. I represent Rimark. My home address is 390 Edmonds Road in Framingham. And as far as the size of the homes, relative to the duplexes, each duplex that we had proposed to the zoning board would have been about 1,800 square feet. So it would have been about 3,600 square feet of living space per duplex. And there would be 2 units per duplex, 4 units total. So 3,600 square feet per lot. And we heard the zoning board loud and clear that they felt that was not in character with the Sewell Street neighborhood, which is a lot of smaller homes, kind of an eclectic mix of different sizes. So we went back and said we would do a very modest 1,500 square foot home, 2-car garage, but living space in that 1,400 to 1,500 square feet. So less than 50% of the living space that we had proposed with the duplex units. And if I could just add, we had introduced to the zoning board a letter from 6 abutters that said that they would prefer a residential use than a commercial use, which is allowed under the CV zoning. And that's what our preference would be, to do a modest single-family residential use as opposed to a commercial.
So you guys have a new plan? I think what you're saying all sounds well and good, and sounds to me like the change that's required by the law, but it's hard for, in my opinion, for us to vote on that when all we're looking at is the old plan.
George, do you happen to have that available?
Anna had said that you're going through the process. We're not designing this yet. We have to go to the zoning board of appeals in order to do this. And it would be contingent upon getting the second lot, the variance. Were that not the case, where we deal with a 28,000 some odd square foot parcel of land, and then we come up with likely a commercial building. So the size of the house has not been, but the style and the layout of the house has not been decided. It's going to be up to the zoning board to decide whether they grant us the permit for a variance based on the houses we submit there. So this is a procedural matter before you. We're suggesting that we're not doing duplexes, we're doing singles. I think that's the focus of what the consideration should be.
George, this is Peter Matthew, town planner. Do you have a ballpark estimate of the size, the square footage of these houses? And I think
Yeah,
that's what this, I think that's what our planning board member is asking.
Yeah, Mr. Marks just said that.
Okay.
1,400 to 1,500 square feet per single family. So 2 14 to 1,500 square foot homes. And that was compared to 2 duplex units on each lot. 1,800 square feet times 2 would be 3,600 per lot. So basically we're proposing to go from 7,200 square feet of living space, which is what we were talking to the zoning board about, versus 3,000 or less. 7,200 versus 3,000 or less. So it's less than 50% of the living space that we had formally proposed. That's what we felt was the material difference.
I have a question for, I guess, through the chair, probably to Peter or both. So what I heard was there's a potential for one very large house. And I think I know that's not what came here, but what I'm concerned is because I'm saying I don't know if that's a material difference, and that was not sort of what we publicized. So I guess we have to really, I'm supporting kind of Kevin's point about what really are we I think we have to decide what is the thing we're voting on that's materially different. And if there's now 2 possibilities, I'm not sure that got advertised for one. Or if we vote to say, we say these 2 smaller modest houses seem in keeping with the neighborhood, that's material different. Can the applicant now go in front of the zoning board with the McMansion because they didn't get the variance based on our vote?
So just so, Kate, I don't mean to jump in, and Peter can correct me, but I'm looking at the statute that Peter sent to us, which is chapter 48, section 16. And what we need is specific and material changes in the conditions upon which the previous unfavorable action was based. So I think what we need to really assess is when the zoning board of appeals took its unfavorable action, what conditions did they base that on, and have those conditions specifically and materially changed? So correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but I think we need to look at the zoning board of appeals decision, and that's where George needs to present an argument that whatever it is the zoning board of appeals made a negative decision on has now changed. And Am I summarizing the standard right, Peter?
No, you're right on, you're 100% correct.
So I'm not clear, Kate, whether we need some kind of other notice. I think we just need clarification from George. Why would this be different from what you presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals? And when the Zoning Board of Appeals denied your application, what was that based on? So I've heard the answer to the first part, but the second part, in the applicant's view, why did the Zoning Board of Appeals deny you? How do you interpret their decision?
Their decision at D, due to the variance denial, the requested special permit for two-family dwellings on the proposed non-conforming lot 9A would no longer be considered because the lot was not created. There's a problem with that legally, but let's just go on to the next part of the D, second sentence. The board considered the request for a special permit for a two-family dwelling on the lots, and they denied that. So they denied two-family dwellings on even the 15,000 square foot lot. That would now be able to be built as, notwithstanding even their decision under zoning, a single-family house. And then the 13,000 square foot lot 9A would simply be land banked for quite some time. So the issue is resolved on D, second sentence, two families. They don't want two families. During their deliberations, there was discussion as to the size of these and the fact that they were duplexes. It's a single family neighborhood. As Mr. Marks indicated, there were 5 of 9 people who wrote in support of this. 4 did not even attend the meeting. The other 4 didn't attend the meeting, nor did the other 5. But this was totally supported, and it went on to deal with really the idea that it was large duplex housing. So those conditions are, by Mr. Marks's own volition, a changed condition that he is willing to go back before the Zoning Board of Appeals and propose single families and try to gain a variance for lot 9A. I think this is really simple. I don't understand why we're focusing on the house
Thank you.
size at this stage.
Honest, can we please leave out the additional comments? You know, I think, thank you for the reason, but I think the planning board will come to its own conclusions.
Right.
But yes.
So
Yeah.
So Peter, in looking at the materials we have the minutes
Mhm.
from the Zoning Board of Appeal. I don't necessarily see the decision, but is
The
Mr.
decisions were part of the application.
Got it. Give me a second. Yep.
But I can do those and I,
Yeah,
you know, in reviewing these and the decisions and working, you know, obviously within the planning office, I can, you know, I've spoken with applicants. I've watched the tape and I've spoken to members of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and you know, I think the outcome was that the two-family, the duplexes, did not meet the fabric of the existing homes and or are not relatable to the fabric of the existing homes.
Okay.
And so that was the kind of the takeaway that I received, is that the two duplexes didn't fit in to the neighborhood. And so therefore a special permit was not granted.
Yeah. And is the decision something that we can glance at or throw up on this screen really quick,
Sure.
just to make sure
Sure.
that we're on the same page as to what we.
Mr. Khan is, you can scroll down, and obviously you're gonna have to turn your,
Oh.
yeah.
Maybe one more time.
Right there.
Finding the board. Minimum lot area, 15,000.
Can you scroll down to the end of it?
D, here's the one. This north and that, we gotta go.
And are you still proposing to merge the lots?
That's, yeah, let's talk about that. Can I go back to the drawing?
You're sharing the screen, so.
So hold on a second. Can you just go, sorry, was it only 2 pages, their decision?
No,
3.
it was 3.
Okay, sorry, I just didn't see the 3rd page. Would you mind just scrolling to the 3rd page as well? Gotcha. Okay.
That's third, there's a second page you can see, and this is the 3rd page. And there's section D, 2-family is really the consideration there. Peter, I think gave you minutes of the meetings. And why do I want to go back to the plan? Oh, the merger issue, yeah. So by some strange reason, there was a letter sent by the building inspector just before the first hearing on this. There was 2 hearings, banked hearings. And he said that the land had been merged and we lost the ability to create a lot that needed a variance. Town council subsequently said that's incorrect. We did not lose the ability to ask for a variance. So under zoning laws, when you own 2 parcels, and that was the old lot line, back in 1947, when this whole subdivision was created, they were small lots. You can see some of the small sizes here. But this was a lot line for these 2 in 1947, and neither one of them had 15,000 square feet. So by operation of law, merger applies, and this was really one lot. You could certainly create a 15,000 square foot lot in a parcel that isn't 15, not to be considered a building lot. So the town council agreed that we could create a lot and ask for a variance because merger had already occurred and we could still get a 15,000 square foot lot. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Oh, I want to say one more thing. Despite the fact that it doesn't have 30,000 square feet, it's in the commercial village zone. And we could use it all to build a 4,000 or 8,000 square foot commercial building. I want that understood. Mr. Marks doesn't want to do that. We want to go back to the zoning board to see if we can get this second lot for a relatively modest house and do 2 of them. Absent that, the lot at the end of the street could have any size house it wants, and we simply land bank 9A for some period of time.
So, I mean, is there any additional questions from the planning board before we get more questions from the public?
So I think there's a nuance of my question. If we say this is materially different, then the process is they go back to the zoning board and they say, if they agree it's materially different, then it can be considered.
No,
But is that only for this changing to quote modest single family homes, or does that allow to open up the process to be something completely different than we're discussing?
hey, can I jump in? I am going to write a decision in a memo outlining what the applicant is proposing. And and obviously that would be for a modest home. It would be in the neighborhood, and that would have to contain 2 homes, 1 on each lot, which would be proposed to be 14,000 to 15,000 square feet. And so then the planning board's vote decision, right, would become part of the record when the applicant therefore appeals to the appeals. And that will be made clear with the zoning board of appeals. If the applicant changes, therefore, I do not think the zoning board of appeals would, number one, accept the application, and number two, find it reasonable, find the application to be approvable at that point.
Can I just clarify, Peter, that once we decide there's a change and we allow the process to go forward, the zoning board of appeals does not need to decide there's a material change. They just get to consider the new application, right?
They consider the new application.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mhm. But with that application, the planning board's decision and or vote would be part of those recommendations, would become part of that application as the zoning, as material taken into account for that application. Does that make sense? They'll be made aware of the planning board in the process that the applicant has gone through regarding M.G.L. 40A, section 16.
So any additional questions, Kate? Okay. Any other question from the planning board before we open it up to the public for questions? Deepa, Kevin, Marcelo? Okay. And now we'll open it up for the oh, Trisha has joined us. I think.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm
Good
here,
night.
but I didn't hear anything that's going on, so I was just gonna hang out and listen.
Okay. And at this point, we'll open it up to the public. And Peter, do you want to call in members who raise their hands for the public?
Sure. So at this point in the meeting, there's only one member of the public with their hand up, and that's Mr. Mark Tassoni. Mr. Mark Tassoni, can you please unmute yourself and address the board with your name and your address?
Okay, Mark Sony, 49 Hawthorne Road in Ashland. Yes, I was at this zoning board of appeals meeting for this. And turned out inside myself, kind of happy to believe what the zoning board did. But here, what's got is the change is from a double duplex. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to answer it this way. It was 2 single level houses. Family houses, not 2 floors, right?
This is Alan
Probably
Marks
at 2 floors, yeah.
from Rimark. They could be, there could be a second story, but very modest. Like I said, 14 to 1,500 square feet total. But not necessarily on one level.
Basically, if it's gonna be, if things work for you, it'd be foundation, 2 foundations, and then the house frame itself.
That's correct.
Okay, so that does disqualify for the zoning board thinking duplex idea. So it's a single family frame house on 1 lot each.
Yes, one single family framed house on each lot. So just very, very briefly, we felt the material difference was we're not asking for duplexes again. We know we can't. So material difference, duplex to single family, 4 units, 4 duplex units versus 2 single family, and 7,200 square feet of living space, which is what we got rejected for, versus say 3,000 square feet of living space. So those 3 characteristics we felt were materially different from our prior application.
Okay, and to the planning board chair, by doing this out, this is no way in any way going to say to the zoning board, we pass or not pass this, but you're not going to influence what zoning board is going to be thinking after this, right?
Correct. This is just a procedural decision. In other words, the way I read the statute, Mark, is they get to make a decision, and then there's a 2-year cooling off period where you can't go back and bother them with the same kind of thing over and over and over again. If you do want to go back and bother them, then another entity, the planning board in this instance, has to say, okay, this is different enough that you're not bothering too much. We can end the cooling period. You don't need to wait 2 years. That's really what this is.
And that's why this is a procedural.
Yes, it's essentially they're asking us to end the two-year cooling off period and go back with something new.
Procedural, but not influencing in any way the zoning board, but a cooling off period only.
Yeah, we're not being asked to decide whether we like this project or if it's approved or anything like that. We're just being asked, is it okay to end the cooling off period? Because we're not going to bug the zoning board of appeals unreasonably. We've got something a little different. That's really what this is about.
And the very last thing to Mr. Collins there. This is all fair and what we do. And Mr. Collins, you and I have been seeing each other for lots of years. And I understand that it may not be what it is, but just cooling off period may come fresh and better in the future. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
There's no hands raised this time.
Okay, and now for a discussion of the planning board, and I'll just jump in that in reading the state statute, chapter 48, section 16, I think that for me, this is enough of a difference, a material change to justify ending the cooling off 2-year period and bringing this back to the zoning board of appeals. It's essentially
I agree with you.
cutting the size quite substantially, and the character of the project is fairly different. And looking at the minutes from the zoning board of appeals, I think multiple members were focused on that character and size. So I think it's good enough for me to end the cooling period and give it back to them to figure out the substance.
I concur.
Hey, do you have thoughts on that, Deepa?
I agree with you, Ken. No.
I agree with if there's the clarification of the modest size. I don't think we have to necessarily find the square footage, but that, as Peter expressed, that would be part of our decision.
Kevin, do you have something you want to add?
No, I would agree. And I first was like confused that there wasn't a plan to show what was different, but I understand it's not fully designed. And I'm now looking at Mr. Connor's letter that does say the newly contemplated application has house sizes more in concert with the neighborhood. So I think that, if referenced by Peter in the decision, kind of covers everything we talked about.
Just to jump in, yeah, a memo and decision will be created by the clerk. That will not, I believe, it will not have to sit for the appeal period because it is not. But I think that will become part of the record, as I said, with this project moving forward.
Hey, Peter, you're kind of going in and out. Just a heads up. Does anyone want to take a shot at making the motion? Anyone on the planning board? Not you, George. All right, I can take I'll give it a shot. So I'll make a motion to approve the request for reconsideration, I believe that's what it's called, Peter? Is that what we call this?
That is correct, yes. It's
Yep.
reconsideration under 48, section 6.
Yep, so we would grant the request under chapter 40A, section 16. And I believe by statute finding a specific and material change in the conditions upon which the previous unfavorable action was based, with those changes being 2 single-family homes rather than 2 duplexes, materially different in size. That's the motion.
Second.
And a roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Kevin McLean, aye.
Thank you.
Peter, do you want to, that's 4 sorry, 444, how do you want to count that?
No,
Five.
that's, Kevin was part of it as associate member, so it's a 550.
Okay.
500. So we are all set, and a memo will be drafted, obviously, in Mr. Connors, and you will be notified when that's done and for your process to move forward.
All
So
right. And
thank you, Mr. Marks. Thank you, Julie.
now we can move to the continuance of Homer Ave, but I'll let Tricia jump in as chair since she's back to handle the continuance and the executive session and so forth.
Only if you're not having fun, Anna.
You go for it. Enjoy.
All right. Thanks everyone for covering for me. So at this time, we'll go to item C on the agenda. 9 to 49 Homer Avenue site plan and special permit application. This is continued from February 23rd. And Peter, I believe we got a request for a continuance on this. Is that right?
That is correct. Just a note, we, at the last public hearing, at the last meeting they did request additional continuance. We did, after hearing this application twice, we had a tech review meeting, and the fire department has brought up some concerns regarding access. A new site plan has not been submitted, therefore it has not been reviewed by us and or the fire department. And so the applicant is asking for a continuance until April 13th. In addition, we have secured a continuance regarding the site plan, the final site plan decision filing to a date further off. And so we are all set regarding timeframes, but they are looking to come back to the planning board on April 13th.
So Peter, just to reiterate, that means that the clock for the project is not a worry in this case, including the process for the design review committee, because I would expect that we would want this project after it goes through technical review and they have redone their plan to that satisfaction, that it would come back to us first before going to the design review committee. And
That is
well within the time that we have.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I think, and I have the ability to get any other extension. And with that said, at the last meeting, we looked at that draft memo for items to look at site review. Kate, I did add your 2 additional items to that letter. However, this project has been on hold, so I haven't redistributed that letter, but I will do so when this project comes back.
Yeah, I'd assume that when it comes back to us, we'll be reviewing that list and finalizing it before sending it to the design review committee.
Yep, I'm on the same page.
Okay, great. Any other comments on 9 to 49 Homer Ave?
I'll make a motion if you're ready.
Mm?
Make a motion that 9 to 49 Homer Ave site plan and special permit application is continued to the April 13th.
I'll second that.
Board meeting.
I'll second it.
And a roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Oh, and Trisha Kendall, aye. All right, so that's continued to April 13th. All right, so we're hitting the 8:30 mark right on the button. Is that where we need to be, Peter?
That's where we need to be, and we have just been joined by our member of our town council staff, Mr. Adam Costa, and so he's going to be jumping in. I did at the beginning of the meeting make an announcement that the planning board will be heading into executive session at 8:30, which we will be doing it, and in a moment we'll be taking a roll call vote. I do want to make it known right now that the planning board will be coming back in open session. So if you are part of if you're part of this meeting right now and are waiting to hear an update on the 10 to 60 Main Street, I'm going to ask everybody to step off this Zoom meeting and then enter back into the waiting room where once the executive session ends and the planning board opens back up into public session, I will let everyone back into the meeting, and then we also will be continuing broadcasting through WACA And Tricia, just to give you notice, WACA and myself have already ironed out the details of that communication. And they will be, and we can do that as we open back up into open session. Is there any questions or concerns on that?
Do you need the planning board to stay put, or you want us to hang up and come back?
Nope, I want the planning board to stay put, but everyone else on the call, which would include Mark, and anybody here waiting for the 10 to 60 Main Street, which would also include their application team, would just leave the call and then enter back into the waiting room. And then once the executive session's over, we'll restart the meeting. I'll let everyone back in. But
Is there an estimate of how long this would take?
I think my best guess, Mark, it's going to be hopefully a quick executive session. And Tricia, do you have any estimate or?
I was going to say maybe 20 minutes. But I'm seeing some good nods from the board, so we'll try to keep it brief so that we can get back to the business at hand. So
You say like between 8:45, 10 of 9, be back on?
yeah,
Probably earlier.
right, and then be back in the waiting room. And then as soon as we come out of executive session, Peter will let everyone back in.
So what would, if I stay on but shut the camera off, would I still be okay?
No,
No, you have to leave the meeting, Mark.
Oh, okay, thank you.
But once, yes.
Peter, do I need to read